could have kept the money. No one would have known. Not the police. Not his neighbors. Not even Shaq. But what this boy did next shocked even the basketball legend himself. When Juan, a quiet teenager from a struggling neighborhood, stumbled upon Big Shaq's wallet, he had no idea one small choice would completely flip his world upside down. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss more real stories like this. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and share this with a friend who still believes in good people. It was one of those heavy afternoons where the sun had already started to set, but the heat was still clinging to the streets like it had nowhere else to go. The neighborhood buzzed with its usual rhythm, cars coughing over cracked asphalt, street vendors shouting their deals, and kids laughing somewhere between alleyways and rusted fences. Golden dust floated through the air as people went about their day, eyes low, thoughts stuck on making it through. Juan was on his usual walk home from school. His sneakers were worn thin, scraping the uneven sidewalk with every step. His backpack, faded and heavy with books that felt more like weights than dreams, tugged at his shoulder. But his mind wasn't on math homework or that pop quiz from earlier. He was thinking about bills. About how his mom, Lucia, juggled 2 exhausting jobs just to keep their tiny apartment running, cleaning houses by day and working the register at a corner store by night. Still, it never felt like enough. The heater hadn't worked in months. The fridge always looked half empty. Rent was the elephant in the room no one mentioned out loud. And Juan? He had gotten used to it. That didn't mean he stopped wishing. Sometimes he'd pass a shop window with new sneakers or fresh hoodies and imagine, just for a second, what it would feel like to not count every dollar in hours of his mom's labor. He never said these things out loud. She already carried enough. But those thoughts? They were always there. Then it happened. Just as he turned onto the main street, he noticed something by the curb, half hidden under a bench, like it was waiting for him. A wallet. Thick. Black leather. No one else seemed to notice. People walked past, too caught up in their own struggles to care. Juan picked it up. It felt heavy in his hands. Curious, he peeked inside and froze. It was packed. Stacks of $100 bills. Credit cards. A driver's license. Even a few personal photos. His heart was thudding in his chest. It was more cash than he'd ever seen in one place. Enough to cover months of rent. Enough to finally give his mom a break. Maybe even get Carla some shoes that didn't come with holes already in them. And then he saw the name. Shaquille O'Neal. At first, it didn't click. But then, of course, Shaq. The basketball icon. The legend from TV. The man everybody talked about. Juan's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't just any wallet. And now it was in his hands. He stood there, motionless, the weight of the decision sinking in. That money could change everything. But it wasn't his. No matter how much they needed it. No matter how easy it would have been to walk away and never say a word. His mom had always told him, real wealth isn't what's in your pockets, it's in your choices. It's doing the right thing, especially when no one's watching. So he did. He went home. Quietly. By the time he stepped inside, the sun had dipped behind the buildings, casting long shadows in their small apartment. Carla was coloring on the floor with broken crayons. Their mom stirred a pot on the stove that smelled more like boiled water than soup. She turned when she saw him. Gave him that tired smile she always gave, soft, but worn out. And without saying a word, Juan placed the wallet on the table. He laid it on a rag before stepping closer. "What's this?" "I found it," Juan said, his voice calm but steady. "It belongs to someone famous." Lucia opened the wallet slowly. Her eyes widened the moment she saw the money. Thick stacks of bills. More than she'd ever seen up close. Then, she looked up at him, really looked, searching his face. "You didn't take anything?" Juan shook his head. Her expression softened. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, the tired lines on her face seemed to relax. She reached out, cupping his cheek with a warm, calloused hand, the kind shaped by years of hard work and sacrifice. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. That night, Juan lay in bed staring up at the ceiling. He'd done the right thing. He knew that. But deep down, he couldn't help wondering, would it even matter? Would anyone care? The wallet was still sitting on the table, untouched. But it filled their small apartment with an invisible weight. Even Carla, usually off in her own little world, kept peeking at it from the floor. Her crayons lay forgotten beside her. Lucia hadn't said much since he told her what happened. Just a silent nod before she turned back to the stove. Now, as she placed 2 bowls of soup on the table, she finally sat across from him, folding her hands like she was preparing for something serious. "You're sure it belongs to that basketball player?" Juan nodded. His ID was inside. Shaquille O'Neal. Lucia exhaled slowly, her eyes drifting back to the wallet. It wasn't just heavy with money. It carried a question. A challenge. A silent temptation. "We could use that money," she said quietly. It wasn't a plan. It was just the truth. "I know," Juan said, staring into his bowl. The soup was mostly broth, thin, watery, with just a few vegetables floating inside. It was the kind of dinner they knew all too well. Lucia ran her fingers through her hair, the exhaustion slipping back into her voice. "You understand some people wouldn't return it, right?" she said. "They'd say a man like him, he wouldn't even notice. That he has more than enough. While the rest of us..." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. One already knew. That logic lived in every corner of their neighborhood. People did what they had to do to survive. The world wasn't fair to them, so why play by its rules? But Juan also knew his mother. Even if she let those thoughts cross her mind, even if she faced the bitter truth of their life daily, she wasn't the kind to take what wasn't hers. She looked at him again. "You still want to return it?" "Yes," Juan said, his voice firm. Lucia looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "All right. We'll find a way." They didn't have a working phone. Their landline had been cut off months ago, and Lucia's old cell had long since given up. But they had something better, a neighbor with a kind heart. That evening, they walked down the hall to Donna Maria's apartment. She opened the door with her usual warm smile, a shawl around her shoulders even though the heat still clung to the air. "Lou, mijo," she said gently. "Everything okay?" Lucia hesitated. "We need to use your phone, it's important." Donna Maria gave them a curious glance but nodded. She grabbed a small, well-kept smartphone from the table beside her armchair. "Go ahead." Juan sat down and typed the name from the ID, Shaquille O'Neal. Where do you even start when you're trying to return something to a global superstar? He scrolled until he found a website tied to Shaq's management team. There was a contact form, a media number, and a general email. Lucia leaned over his shoulder. "Try the number," she said. His hand shook slightly as he dialed. It rang twice. Then an automated voice came on. "Please leave a message after the tone." Juan took a breath. Hi. My name is Juan, and I live in..." He stopped himself before saying his address out loud. I found something that belongs to Shaquille O'Neal. A wallet. I want to return it. Please call back if this is the right number." He hung up and stared at the phone. His heart was racing. Lucia gently squeezed his shoulder. "You did good." Donna Maria, who had been quietly watching from the side, finally spoke. "What is it you're returning?" Lucia hesitated. But Juan answered. "A wallet. A really expensive one. It has a lot of money in it." The old woman raised an eyebrow. "And you're giving it back?" "Yes." A small smile tugged at her lips. Your mama raised you right. They thanked her and returned to their apartment, where the wallet still waited on the table. That night, Juan barely slept. All he could think about was whether that phone call would ever be returned. Maybe they wouldn't believe him. Maybe they got calls like that all the time, people pretending to have something important just to get attention. What if they thought he was lying? What if no one ever called back? Morning came. No response. Juan dragged himself through school, every hour weighed down by the same thought: what if I did the right thing, and it didn't even matter? By the time he got home, he was too tired to hope anymore. And then, a knock on the door. It was Donna Maria, standing with her usual calm smile, but this time, something was different. Someone called for you, she said, holding out her phone. Juan's heart jumped. He grabbed the phone. Hello? A woman's voice answered, smooth and professional. Is this Juan? Yes, he said, gripping the phone tight. This is Emily. I work with Shaquille O'Neal's team. You left a message saying you found his wallet? Yes, Juan repeated, his voice shaking. It's here. I didn't take anything. I swear. There was a soft laugh on the other end. I believe you, kid. Mr. O'Neal did lose his wallet. We've been trying to figure out where he might have dropped it. He's going to be very happy to hear you found it. Relief washed over him like a wave. So, how do I get it back to him? We'd like to arrange a meeting, she said. Would you and your family be comfortable meeting him somewhere safe? Juan looked over at his mom. She nodded without hesitation. Yeah, he said, his voice firmer now. That would be okay. Great, Emily said. Let me check with him and I'll call you back with the time and place. When Juan hung up, he turned to Lucia, unable to hold in his excitement. They're going to set up a meeting. I'm really going to give it back to him. Lucia smiled, running her fingers through his hair like she used to when he was little. I told you, doing the right thing always matters. Later that evening, the phone rang again. Emily confirmed the plan. They'd meet the next day, at a public park not far from their neighborhood. Juan barely had time to let it all sink in before exhaustion took over. That night, as he lay staring at the ceiling, his mind was spinning, caught somewhere between nerves and disbelief. He had no idea how much his life was about to change. The next morning, Juan was awake before the sun. Soft light crept through the thin curtains, painting long lines across the walls. For a moment, he lay still, wondering if it had all been a dream. But the wallet, still resting on the table, told him it was real. Today's the day, he thought, sitting up, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Today, I meet Shaquille O'Neal. Lucia was already in the kitchen, moving quietly as she prepared breakfast. The smell of warm tortillas and scrambled eggs filled the apartment, a rare, beautiful scent. She turned to him with a gentle smile. Eat something, she said. You don't want to go on an empty stomach. He sat down, but he couldn't eat much. His stomach was a knot of nerves. Lucia noticed. She set down her plate and placed a hand on his shoulder. Whatever happens today, I want you to remember something. You did the right thing. That's what matters most. He nodded. But still, what if Shaq didn't care? What if it was just a handshake, a photo, and goodbye? He wasn't looking for a reward. But deep down, he wanted it to mean something. After breakfast, his mom helped him pick out his cleanest jeans and a button-up that was a little too big, but still decent. As he got ready, Carla tugged on his sleeve. Can I come too? She asked, eyes wide. Lucia knelt beside her. Not today, mi amor. But Juan will tell you all about it when he gets back. Carla pouted but didn't argue. Juan gave her a quick hug, then stepped outside with his mom. The sun had climbed higher now, casting soft golden light over their neighborhood. They took the bus to the park. It wasn't far, but every stop felt like forever. Juan kept glancing out the window, watching the city go by, towers and broken sidewalks, shiny new stores next to boarded-up ones. The richer side of town felt like another planet. When they arrived, he saw it. A black SUV parked near the entrance. A couple of people standing nearby, scanning the park. His stomach tightened. This is really happening. Lucia placed a hand on his back. You ready? Juan nodded, even though his heart was thudding like a drum. They stepped onto the path and headed toward the open clearing where the meeting had been set. Around them, families were scattered, some on benches, others watching their kids play on the swings. But Juan only had one thing on his mind. This moment. This choice. This meeting. And the man whose life he had unknowingly stepped into. It was just a park. Kids played. Parents chatted. The breeze carried laughter through the air like any other afternoon. But for Juan, it felt like the whole world had hit pause, like time itself had slowed down to watch this moment unfold. And then, he saw him. Even from a distance, Shaquille O'Neal was impossible to miss. He towered above everyone around him, dressed simply in a dark hoodie and jeans. His massive hands were tucked casually into his pockets, no entourage, no flashing cameras, just a few people from his team nearby. And yet, when Shaq's eyes met Juan's, his entire face lit up with a warm, easy smile. Juan swallowed hard. He'd never met anyone famous before. And Shaq wasn't just famous, he was a legend. A name you saw on TV, in commercials, and highlight reels. But now he was real. Standing just a few feet away. As they approached, Shaquille stepped forward, his presence calm but powerful. And yet somehow, he didn't feel intimidating. He felt safe. You must be Juan, Shaq said, his deep voice rising above the noise of the park. Juan nodded quickly. Yes, sir. Shaq chuckled. No need for sir. Just Shaq is fine. Juan gave a nervous smile, then reached into his backpack and pulled out the wallet. Here it is, he said. I didn't take anything from it. Shaq took the wallet, opened it, and looked inside. For a few seconds, he said nothing, his face unreadable. Then, to Juan's surprise, he let out a deep, genuine laugh, the kind that made people turn and smile without knowing why. Everything's here, Shaq said. Even the cash. You know how rare that is? Juan didn't know what to say. So he just shrugged. It wasn't mine to take, he said simply. Shaquille nodded, slipping the wallet back into his pocket. That tells me a lot about you, kid, he said, glancing at Lucia. And about how you were raised. Lucia smiled softly, looking just as overwhelmed as her son. Then Shaq crouched down a little, bringing himself to Juan's level. Can I ask you something? Juan nodded. You could have kept it. No one would have known. I'm guessing things aren't easy for you and your family. Juan hesitated, then nodded again. They're not. So why bring it back? It was a simple question. But Juan had thought about it every day since finding that wallet. My mom always says, we should do the right thing, he said. Even when no one's watching. Shaquille smiled again, but this time it was different. Deeper. More personal. There was understanding in his eyes, something unspoken, like he'd lived a life that once called for the same kind of choice. I like that, he said quietly. You're a good kid, Juan. Juan's chest felt warm, full, like something inside had shifted. He'd expected a handshake. A thank you. Maybe a picture. But this felt like something bigger. Shaq turned to Lucia. You should be proud, he said. I am, she answered, her voice steady. There was a pause. Then Shaquille looked at his team, then back at Juan. As if a decision had clicked into place. You know, he said, I don't just want to say thank you and walk away. Juan blinked. What do you mean? I mean, Shaq said, I want to do something for you and your family. Juan stood frozen. Shaq turned to one of his team members. "We'll figure out the details later," he said. Then looked back at Lucia. She started to shake her head. "Oh, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to," Shaq interrupted gently. "I want to." He looked Juan in the eyes. "You didn't ask for anything. You did it because it was the right thing to do. That's rare. That's the kind of person the world needs more of." Juan didn't know what to say. He felt like he'd stepped into someone else's story. But it was happening. To him. And somehow, it felt right. The bus ride home was quiet. Juan sat by the window, watching the city slip by in flashes of concrete, rusted metal, and sunlight. It all felt surreal, like something he'd read in a book, not something he'd lived. Lucia sat beside him, hands folded in her lap. She hadn't said much since they'd left the park. But the silence between them felt different. Not tired or heavy, but peaceful, hopeful. As they walked through the cracked sidewalks back to their apartment, Lucia finally spoke. He meant what he said. Juan glanced over. "Who?" She gave him a look like he should have known. "Shaquille O'Neal." "You really think so?" he asked. Lucia nodded. "People like him don't say things they don't mean." He didn't have to offer anything. He could have just taken the wallet and gone. But he didn't. Juan thought about that. It was true. Shaq had already said thank you. He had already recognized what Juan had done. And still, there was something more behind his words. Something that felt like a promise. That night, as Juan lay in bed, the full weight of the day finally settled in. The nerves. The shock. The excitement. And somewhere underneath it all, a quiet sense of pride. Not because he was meeting a celebrity, but because he'd stayed true to who he was. And that had been enough to change everything. The shock of it all hadn't worn off. Juan's body ached with exhaustion, but his mind refused to settle. He kept hearing his mother's voice, remembering Shaquille O'Neal's promise. And for the first time in a long time, he let himself believe maybe things really could change. The next morning, life tried to go back to normal. At least for a little while. Juan went to school, but concentrating on lessons was nearly impossible. His thoughts kept drifting back to the park. To the moment Shaq smiled at him. To the weight of the wallet in his hands. It didn't feel like his life. It felt like something out of a movie. And he didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't know how to explain it in words that would feel real. By the time he got home that afternoon, the apartment smelled different. Warm. Rich. Familiar, yet surprising. He stepped inside and found Lucia by the stove, stirring a pot of real soup, thick, hearty, nothing like the broth-thin meals they were used to. On the counter was a bag of groceries. And next to it, a folded piece of paper. Juan dropped his backpack. Where did this come from? Lucia turned, her eyes full of disbelief she hadn't yet put into words. Shaquille's team, she said softly. Juan blinked. Already? She nodded. They called this morning. Asked for our address. Then, someone showed up with these. She gestured to the groceries. Then picked up the note. It wasn't just a note. It was a letter. Printed on heavy paper with a clean, professional font, but the message wasn't cold. It was personal. Shaq had written it himself. Lucia. I meant what I said yesterday. Your son is a rare kind of person, and the way you've raised him speaks volumes. I know things haven't been easy. I want to help. This is just the beginning. My team will be in touch soon, with something more permanent. Take care. Shaquille. Juan read it twice, then looked up at his mom. What does he mean? Something more permanent? Lucia exhaled slowly, as if she'd been holding her breath all day. I don't know, she said. But Juan, I think this is only the beginning. She was right. The next week became a whirlwind. It started with a call from Emily, the same woman from Shaquille's team. This time, she had questions about Lucia's work, her hours, her income, her situation. Lucia didn't complain. She never did. But she told the truth. Cleaning houses by day, working the store at night, barely getting by. A few days later, the phone rang again. Only this time, it wasn't Emily. It was Shaq himself. Lucia nearly dropped the phone when she heard his voice. Juan watched her freeze in place, hand pressed to her chest, then slowly bring the phone to her ear. She thanked him again and again, until finally, Shaq said something that made her stop mid-sentence. I spoke to some people, he said. There's a position opening at a company I trust. It's stable. Good pay. Benefits. If you're interested, it's yours. Lucia didn't speak. She just stood there, stunned. Her hands shook slightly. Her mouth opened, then closed. Juan had never seen his mother speechless. Finally, she whispered, I don't know what to say. Just say yes, Shaq replied warmly. And so, she did. The change didn't happen overnight. But it happened. 2 weeks later, Lucia was training for her new job. An office job. Something she'd never imagined herself doing. The late shifts at the store were over. The fear of eviction, the constant battle with bills, it all began to lift. Shaq's help didn't end there. His team made sure rent was covered for the next few months. Gave them breathing room. Carla got new clothes that fit. Juan finally had school supplies that didn't fall apart by October. And then, one afternoon, they got another invitation. Shaq wanted them to visit the set of a commercial he was filming in the city. It wasn't just a visit. It was a VIP experience. Juan couldn't believe what he was seeing. Lights, cameras, crew members rushing around. It was a whole different world. Shaq welcomed them like old friends. Introduced them to everyone. Made sure they felt seen. At the end of the visit, he handed Lucia another envelope. Inside, an official job offer. And something else. Another handwritten note. Lucia, this is for you. For your family. For the future you've worked so hard to build. You don't owe me anything. This is what you deserve. And Juan, he's going to do great things. I can see it. Shaquille. Lucia wiped her eyes. Her hands trembled. Juan stood beside her, heart full. Because this time, it didn't feel like a dream. It felt like hope. The story didn't stay quiet. Someone in the park had filmed that first moment, when Juan handed back the wallet, when Shaq laughed at the untouched cash, when he knelt down to look Juan in the eyes like an equal. They posted the clip online. By the next morning, it went viral. People across the world watched it, shared it, debated it. Some praised Juan's honesty. Others celebrated Lucia, calling her the true hero for raising a boy with such integrity. There were skeptics, of course. But most people saw it for what it was, a moment of real goodness in a world that needed it. Schools used the story in ethics lessons. Parents told it to their kids. News stations ran the story nationwide. And Shaq? He took it even further. He launched a charity initiative inspired by Juan, dedicated to helping low-income families, supporting education, and creating real opportunities for kids who, like Juan, had greatness inside them, if only someone gave them the chance. It's not about the money, Shaq said in an interview. It's about character. Who you are when no one's watching. Juan saw it all happen with quiet awe. He hadn't asked for any of this. He hadn't returned that wallet expecting a reward. He just wanted to do the right thing. But one choice. One moment of honesty changed everything. A few weeks later, Juan was walking home when a group of younger kids passed him on the sidewalk. They whispered, pointed. One of them, maybe 10 years old, approached him, nervous. "You're the kid from the video, right?" he asked. Juan nodded. The boy hesitated. "That was cool. My mom told me about it. She said I should always do the right thing, even if no one's watching." Juan smiled. "She's right," he said. The boy grinned, then ran back to his friends. And in that moment, Juan realized his story had grown beyond him. It wasn't just about what happened to him. It was about what he stood for. And as he sat at the dinner table that night with Lucia and Carla, eating a warm meal in a home that no longer felt fragile, Juan thought back to the day he found that wallet. The choice he made. The path he chose. And how one small act of honesty had changed everything. If this story moved you, subscribe for more real stories that inspire hope. Share this video with someone who still believes in doing the right thing. And let us know in the comments, what would you have done? Don't miss the next video, it's right here waiting for you.